One wish willow. Spark the middle and break in half. I wish whoever watches this video gets obsessed with my channel. So I finally watched Obsession, and I'm a little obsessed. Like, I don't know, it's been so long. Granted, I've not watched Backrooms yet, but it's been so long since I've actually gone and went to the movie theaters and actually left fulfilled. You know, it is so refreshing to actually go to the movie theaters and actually feel good once you leave and not feel like you just wasted money and time. Anyway, so this video today is just to talk about Obsession and a couple things I liked about it. This really isn't like an analysis video. I mean, I'll be talking a little bit about the movie, like analysis wise. For the most part, it's just me rambling on about the Obsession movie. First thing I want to say is the format they filmed it in, whatever format that was, they did instead of the standard like American format. So good, so good. I was honestly hoping they would change it though halfway through and have like a realization scene to have it open, kind of like how like Hunger Games had did it, or what other movies have done that? Other movies have done it. You know what I'm talking about? Like, other movies have done it where like the aspect ratio opens up on certain scenes. Like Everything Everywhere All at Once also did that, had different aspects throughout the whole entire movie. But no, I really did like how they did just that square aspect ratio throughout the whole entire movie. I thought that was really good. But starting out with the movie, the opening sequence where we start off with Bear in the booth at the diner, basically confessing his feelings to Nikki, but we also know that actually wasn't Nikki. He was basically just practicing. That scene all the way up to the car ride scene where the One Wish Willow is finally broken. That whole entire sequence was so good. And it was honestly, that's what I mean, of course, it's not like the intro. Like, the intro just was like the diner scene. But to me, that was the whole entire like intro of the movie. That was kind of the whole entire like act one of the movie. And then we went into act two, which was the actual process. And then, of course, act three was like the ending scene and like the conclusion. But that whole entire act one, that whole entire intro segment was so good. I think they did a really good job, first of all. Let's go ahead and give some praise. $750,000 budget. Less than $1 million to make this movie. And on top of that, the actors, like we've been so starved. It's nice to finally be fed. You know, we need original concepts, especially from Gen Z. Like Gen Z, I think we can bring such a new twist and version to the table of cinema. And it's just good to see. It's just nice to see. But yeah, the whole entire opening sequence, absolutely love that. I think they did a great job at really, like, the actors, love the unknown actors. They're really like first like big, well, maybe not their first big, but from what I know of, the first time I ever seen them. And the actors did a really good job, especially Nikki's character, phenomenal. Where the Oscar at? So good. But the fact that she gave Nikki such a depth of character in such a short little like span of time, it honestly, not to hint back at Stranger Things, but it honestly reminded me a lot of 11 in the fact that there's that trend of Jane, we hardly knew you on TikTok, whatever. Same with like Nikki, like we hardly got to know you, because she did a perfect job at like encapsulating this glimpse of Nikki and her character. Like, we never get to see any more of like the real Nikki, of course, after the One Wish Willow breaks. But just in a little short span we got to see of her, she gave us so much, but also gave us nothing at the exact same time. Like, she gave us enough to make Nikki a very interesting character, and especially through the eyes of Bear, because it is Bear's POV. And it's one of those things like, God, we wish we got more of Nikki. You know, like we wish we got to see more of a character, because she just became so interesting and like lovable. And of course, it's from like Bear's POV, so like a lot of it is probably like masked with that. Absolutely did an amazing job. Also, loved the friend group dynamic. I think that was also established really well in the opening act, the opening sequence, about how each character is very individualized, but of course, like I said, we're still very focused on Nikki and Bear because they are the main two characters. But no, amazing job by the actors. Bravo. Hope y'all get good. Honestly, I think Obsession should. I think it's going to, but I think it also should win awards. But yeah, great way to set up the story in the beginning, especially with Nikki and the actress. I think her name's, is it Indy? I think her name might be Indy. Phenomenal job. Absolutely amazing. She did absolutely amazing. One thing I also think too this movie did really well was the pacing. This movie's pacing was really good. I never, like, nothing never felt like it was dragged on. Honestly, you know it's good because it almost feels too short of a movie. Granted, I've only watched the movie once, and I will say I wish I watched it again before making this video so I could have more intel and analysis. So that's why this video is more of a commentary instead of less me like actually dissecting the movie, because I really can't recall a lot of it because it's just so much in first watch through. But the pacing, great pacing, absolutely great. Like, I never got bored. It always felt like each segment of the movie was perfectly paced, like I said, with the act 1, act 2, and act 3. And you know it's good because it almost feels too short. I said, like, and that's how you know you've done a good movie, because it feels too short of a movie. I want more. I want to know more. I want more lore. I want more screen time. I want a longer movie. So that's how you know you've done good. The cinematography was another big thing. Like I said, it goes back to that aspect ratio. It was, I feel like that's one thing that Gen Z is very a Gen Z thing. I feel like, I mean, granted, cinematography has always been shaped over cultures and years, but I feel like Gen Z, knock on wood, of course, this is like verbatim, like, what do you have to back it up, really? But I feel like we're a very, like, cinematography wise generation, if that makes sense. Like, we are very, very much into the aesthetics. So looking at Obsession through the lens of cinematography, it is a very visually pleasing and well sought out scenes. Like, every scene feels very distinct, but it also all collectively still flows together. So the cinematography in it, so good, because I personally love cinematography. I love, like, beautiful shots of things, whatever. And also, to hint onto that too, from the cinematography also goes into the soundtrack. The soundtrack in this movie was literally, I have in Spotify, I have like 4 of the soundtracks saved. The main 2 that I love listening to is Love is in the Air Part 1, which we all know that one. We've heard all over TikTok. It's just, I'll get into that in a second. And then the other one I have saved is Bear, where, of course, it's Bear's scene at the very, very end. Love is in the Air, and this actually touches on a point I'm going to make later. Honestly, I may not even get into later. I'm just going to talk about it now, is the whole entire sequence with the Love is in the Air. That sequence is so good. Like, I don't know how to describe it other than, like, the sense of dread. The Love is in the Air, if you've not listened to it, please go listen to that soundtrack. It is very, like, the word I like to use is haunting. It's very haunting. Like, it's so, like, not whimsical, but it's so, like, love coded, but it also has this underlying sense of dread and, like, something's not right. Like, something's uneasy here. Like, something is off about this. So, like, that soundtrack itself is so good. And, of course, Bayer's soundtrack, which I'll talk about later whenever I get to that, because I do want to talk about that scene. But I also think, too, the soundtracks, not to go back to, I feel like the sounds kind of have a little bit of Stranger Things vibe to it. Do you get, like, not, I don't want to say like a Stranger Things vibe, but, like, it does kind of have that vibe to it. Like, I don't know, like, what beat it is, or, like, what synth, maybe. I don't know, like, what it is. But there's something in them that kind of had that inkling of, like, this was kind of like Stranger Things. I don't know if it's an 80s vibe, I don't know, but it was really, like, I don't know, like, I really enjoyed the soundtrack, and also perfectly tied in with the movie and the aesthetic. I also want to talk to you about the jump scares and the psychological aspect of it. Those are perfectly well done. Now, I will say, I know this is a scare, like, this is like a horror movie, whatever, I get scared over. For me personally, honestly, I left the theater more, like, sad. And I really didn't leave like that scared. But I will say it was scary. Like, there 100% was scary aspects. But I'm much more on the psychological sad side of it than the actual horror side of it. But I will say they did a great job with making Nikki's like entity, or her, like, second conscious, very, very much like robotic, or like unhuman. Like it's like something that's trying to learn how to be human, which is, in my opinion, one of the scariest things. Like, I think humanoid creatures, or like things that kind of act like humans, kind of like skinwalkers, or get me saying that, I'm in the Appalachians. Kind of that vibe, humanoid, but also like animal-like mannerisms. That is so freaky. Like, that is so, like, it's such a good concept, because it's just so, like, I don't know, like, I feel like innately human, that just freaks us out. Things that are, like, somewhat human but also not human, like, that's like some, like, psychological thing. So I love that. So I love that. I love throughout the movie how she is learning how to be human in a way, and you can tell, like, with, like, the backwards walking, the watching Bear sleep across the room in the dark, and being so sweet, then immediately going to screaming, like, completely emotions from 0 to 100. Like, it's so well done. It's so good. So the jump scares and the psychological aspect, perfect. With the whole entire sandwich the cat sandwich, Sammy, R.I.P. Sammy. All of that too, like it's all very, like the duct tape door, it's all very, it's doing so much without doing a lot. You know, like it isn't something extremely unbelievable. It has this side of realism to it that makes it even more real. And one of my favorite things too, one of my favorite things of this entire movie was Nikki's realization scenes whenever she snaps back into her body and she's like, what is going on? And I know we first see that in the car whenever the one wish willow is initially snapped. And so then of course Bear is like clueless, which I'll get into Bear's character here in a minute because that's a lot to unpack. But there's that scene. Then of course there's the bedroom scene where it's much more intense, and of course it would be because Nikki would be much more confused for the fact that she is making out with him whenever when she didn't choose to do that, which adds the subtlest jump scare and uneasiness without making it like horror and without doing a lot. That's why it's so perfect. But with that being said, they made Nikki the perfect love interest, the perfect like limerence character through Bear's POV. And I was also going to touch on this too before I go into kind of Bear's side of things. The movie for me personally made me so sad because it really felt like, especially like really only in the beginning, of course, once the one wish willow is snapped and things took a much more horror psychological twist, and it's not just like a normal like typical like friend group, or maybe not really typical friend group because Bear like is weird, like he'd be doing way too much. But beforehand, they make you love Nikki so much. As much as a coward Bear is lonely. He definitely has some psychological issues. The male loneliness epidemic. We been new. We've been new. But in the very, very beginning, he wasn't like the villain he was at the end. That's one thing I also like too, is throughout the movie, we see him progressively get deeper and deeper into his character, but we'll get into that in a second. It almost felt like Bear Nikki actually could have been something. I did watch a couple interviews with the director and the cast. One thing they said they did and that I liked was they filmed scenes where Nikki's character was interested in Bear, and they filmed scenes where Nikki's character wasn't interested in Bear, and they kind of married the two together is what they said. So you kind of get the back and forth of, does Nikki like him, does she not, kind of vibe, being like there's kind of mixed signals there. I am a firm believer in this also too because the actress herself had said it, that Nikki probably would have given Bear a shot if he would have just been honest, which makes the whole entire thing even worse because Bear's biggest obstacle before any of this even started was the fact that he couldn't be honest with himself and his insecurity. And the fact that Nikki asks him point blank in the beginning of the movie in Act 1, like when she first tells him that she can't tell nobody else stuff, like she tells him basically on the lines of that, whatever, and talks about how if she likes a guy nobody knows, and how she asks Bear point blank, if you like me, now's the time to tell me. Like, if you like me, now's the time to tell me. And of course, Bear had multiple chances to just be honest. And it's like, Bear, it's like you probably actually would have had a shot. Would y'all have worked out? Who's to say? Probably not. But at least you could have actually had a shot at it instead of making this into a completely awful thing. Which also, too, last thing to defend Bear on is he didn't know the one wish willow was going to work. Who in their right mind would know that was going to work? But again, it was like something stupid, and as like a coward, he was just like, I'm going to break this and say it anyway. Which, like, be honest. Be honest. Be confident. So I will say, I love that inkling of this is a story that could have actually been really good. Now, I will say, I do understand, I completely understand the fact of Bear never actually liked Nikki, and it was just infatuation, and he liked the idea of Nikki, which becomes more prominent throughout the movie. But in that beginning scene, like that beginning act, it felt very, very much like what could have been, you know, like what could have been of them if Bear didn't go down this path of like evilness, of being a bad person. Also, to like to mention in the beginning, whenever Bear's cat dies, Sammy, I think it's also a really pivotal moment that adds much more to the story than people realize, or at least that I've seen people talk about, is his cat dying. Also, the symbolism with him at the end, basically dying in the exact same way. Love that symbolism. But also, too, in his room on the wall, whenever he gets the call from Nikki, and she's like, I want you to come out tonight. I have something to tell you. And of course, Bear being with his mind, him thinking, what I got from it initially was, oh, she's going to ask me out, like, Bear, no, is the cat on the wall, the cat clock on the wall, and talking about even tying back to earlier on with Ian whenever he said, you have time, or something like that. Like, so I forgot where it was at, but somebody said he had time, and to seeing Sammy die, and the clock in his room being a cat, and Nikki tells him she put in her 2 weeks of notice that she's going to be leaving soon. In a way, it's like he knows this is going to die. Like Nikki and his relationship is going to completely die from like proximity. And also too, like how they didn't dive into the One Wish Willow lore. Like as we get progressively throughout the story, we do learn more about the One Wish and what it does, but just enough to make the movie not this whole entire goose chase about the lore. Like I feel like a lot of movies do that, but just the concept of One Wish Willow is really good because you can really skim the surface and not really get into the lore of it. Bear, his true character starts to be shown, not just his true character, but also this character that has found themselves in a predicament and keeps on making decisions over and over and over again that does nothing but harm. And in my view, it's great cinema, but it's also this is, I think it's where I also like am sad about it because I'm also just like, which granted I'm not on this train of like let's make him the victim, let's feel bad for Bear or whatever, because that's not where I'm going at. Like Bear is the villain, like he clearly is a villain, but it also is, there's a side of it of realizing like this person is a villain, like, and it also makes me think like how did that person get to that villain stage? Like what has happened to them to become that villain? And we kind of see it with them. Actually, like I don't know, like it's just a perfect storyline, and I like how throughout the movie we get deeper and deeper into this like turmoil with Bear and being like, this is like a really bad guy, like he's really really bad. And this does bring me to, of course, Bear's, I don't want to say climax scene, but his climax scene where he is in the bathroom, and just that whole entire sequence of him in the bathroom and that song, the soundtrack again. Love the soundtrack perfectly. I feel like encapsulates the feeling of what we were watching, how it was going down. And of course, Bear very much went through a lot. Granted, he put himself through all of that and also took away Nikki's life and also got a bunch of his friends killed. Finally, he had this realization moment, I think, there. Like that scene really encapsulates like, I'm the villain. It's like when he realized it was like, I've done all of this, like this is on me. Like I've done everything. Like this is literally all on me. So like it's like that climax scene of all that. I love a static shot where like it's like zooming in on him after he of course takes the pills. Of course, as he was going to, I think, try to make himself vomit again, we hear the snap of the willow branch that he bought later on in the movie. And we immediately see this shift in his demeanor. And now, before I go and talk about this scene, I will say, and not to be that person, but I will say this was my prediction for the movie. I will say going into the movie, I thought what would happen was Bear would do the One Wish Willow. She becomes obsessed with him. Then later on, she also breaks One Wish Willow and they become obsessed with each other. And like that's how the movie ends. I thought that was what was going to happen. And of course, it did happen for a few seconds. And it was very, very twisted and psychological and had a bunch of layers to it. And it was really, really great. But then, of course, Bear didn't even have time to make himself throw up. So inevitably he also died. And then right as Nikki is about to also die, the curse breaks and she snaps out of it. And she of course looks around and she screams, and then the movie ends. Great movie, great ending, great sequence of things, great pacing. The only two things I will say is, like I said, I wish we got more of like the real Nikki somehow. We could have got to see more of her character. She is just that much interesting of a character. And just like Eleven in Stranger Things, it's one of those things where it's like, this character deserves so much better. Like Nikki literally deserves something. Like she literally did nothing wrong. She did absolutely nothing wrong. And then her whole entire life now has been messed up because of a man. Go figure. Literally go figure. What's new? What is new? But no, I love the progression of Bear's villain arc. Also costume. Great costumes throughout the whole entire movie. Loved them. Loved the simplicity of it, and also I love the fact that it really goes to show that you don't need a lot to make a great movie. Like, not to say that we need to deprive of resources and do that, but it's better than just having a big franchise movie and just throwing a bunch of money at it and resources. We are tired of the slop. We want to see original, new concepts and new people, new ideas, and those are what should get the funds. Because I can only imagine what Obsession could have been if it had like double the funds, triple the funds. Like, you know, like I wonder how much more they could have done. It was a great movie. The other thing I also want to say too was it would have been something to see, which of course I love going like these like what if like fantasies. But it would have been something to see if Bear and Nikki ended up being obsessed with each other, and then we got another time lapse of them growing up and like having like the white picket fence house or whatever, and having kids and growing old together with this like obsession, like curse or whatever. They're both old. Bear dies, and then old 80-year-old Nikki finally snaps out the curse and has a realization. That that's the only thing that I'm like, granted, of course, that's like adding a lot extra, but I'm like, that also would have been something to see, and like I would have loved like that would also been equally as crazy as a story, is like them actually like hiding the bodies again, and like having kids and doing all this stuff, making all these memories, going to like Disneyland, for example, I don't know, and make them grow old, and then having Bear die and have Nikki finally snap out of it, and like have like that realization, like my life is gone now. Because I think the director said that like Nikki's just gonna end up in prison, which honestly, like that is so. I mean, it's better than the curse, but also like Nikki, like this whole entire situation is sad, all because of a man. A man caused all of this. Bear caused literally all of this. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you guys next time.